There are two buildings that are in really important historic buildings in Christchurch that are in public hands that currently don't have a firm plan for restoration and possibly don't even have the money for their full restoration. And they're two of the most important buildings, not just in Christchurch but in New Zealand. There is Mountford's building. There is also Samuel Hurst Seeger's Municipal Council chambers. They've both been made safe and protected from the weather, and yet the council doesn't have a ready supply of money to fully restore them. And they're jewels, they're on the river. These two buildings in particular are two of the most important expressions of that period of architecture. And the Queen Anne of Samuel Hurst Seeger, for example, it's the only example. It was the first example in New Zealand. And what else is going to tell us those stories from our past if our architecture isn't here to do it? To me, that's one thing that a portion, and not a very large portion, of $1 billion could be spent on.
How much will it cost to repair the two buildings?
I understand the current figure for the Provincial Council buildings is around about 108 million. The Provincial Council buildings, for example, has a large portion of it is timber, so presumably that could be restored and reopened quite quickly. Yep. All the material from it has been numbered, recorded, palleted, stored safely, so they know exactly where every piece is, where it came from, and the building's been sealed. On the Municipal Council buildings, on the brick one, would be less than that. It's a much smaller building. And also imagine all that we've learnt from restoring the Arts Centre. There's all that knowledge and there's all that expertise that's right here working on that project. It'd be so wonderful to take that team and all that knowledge and expertise and translate it to the Provincial Council buildings before it left Christchurch.
I think the tradition in Europe, particularly in Italy, is that you board the buildings up and you protect them to make sure that future earthquakes or the weather doesn't do any damage, and then you wait around until there's money to repair them. So that it's probably a longer, slower rebuild process, but you end up with a city that protects its heritage and its place much more carefully than we did here. Well, our instinct here was to demolish and start again. Not universally, but that was what happened. Photos and stories of buildings are not the same as the building, because there's always a life and an agency and effect and a sort of experience of being in a building that's like time travelling. And if you demolish those buildings, you lose that forever. And it's worth doing this for 10 years to see if you can maybe save them, and it might take 20 years, or it might not happen. Maybe in 40 years they decide that it's too much money, but at least you've given it a go. I think rather than us as experts deciding what could happen with $1 billion, isn't the idea that we go back to the city and the people that live here and who have grown up here and whose grandkids will live here and say, what do you think $1 billion should be spent on? Absolutely.
I think that would be a game changer for Christchurch. Imagine the re-engagement that we would have as a population with the subject matter of the city, with this place. That could be really powerful.
Participatory budgeting is a thing. You can get either citizen juries or you get representatives of people that aren't elected officials. They're chosen people from the city.
Yeah, so they're school teachers and firefighters.
Nurses and all sorts. And you get them to, they have workshops and representations with people, and there's a long or short process where they decide collectively what happens with $1 billion. And who knows what we might come up with then. We might decide that it should be spent on the residential red zone in terms of like ecological and building amazing things there, or they might put it into cooperative housing loans, or they might decide that you want a big inner city market that supports local food culture,
or electric buses,
or they
free Wi-Fi on buses.
Or they might put it into the bank for 10 years and use the interest to do things and decide that actually in 10 years was when we want $1 billion, not now. I mean, who knows what people would come up with.
Yeah, and then it could be a money unit as well.
Yeah, exactly. Which I mean, it might be that people just want to invest the money into local businesses and create loans for local startup businesses and small businesses, and it's just this $1 billion fund to get the economy going.
Yeah, or green technologies.
Or green technologies.
I mean, the powerful thing about participatory budgeting is that you get to look at all these options side by side, and the public get to talk about it and decide it and debate it, and then make that decision about where that money goes.
And inevitably that public would then get committed and would feel completely engaged with their city and probably start participating in the making of the ideas as well, not just the choosing where the money goes.
Yeah. And it could renew local body politics entirely. And also we'd have no one else to blame but ourselves if it went wrong.
Yeah, the risk is it would stimulate controversy as well, and this is where...
That's good, isn't it?
It is, but as long as we learn how to
deal with
controversy politely and respectfully, and not throw tantrums when the $1 billion doesn't get spent on the thing that I want it to be spent on.
Yeah.